thank you, all of you, for sharing your experience and what you have learned. I definitely see a desire to take those shared values and try to practice them in the everyday life that we all share together, how we see each other, how we see the other, how we find the other within, so that we reconstruct communities that are based on equality and respect and dignity. Badru. I can give you a mic.
Thanks so much for the amazing presentations from each of you. My question goes to Dr. George, who talked about Nigeria and said so much about the diversity and also the religious conflicts that we have in Nigeria. And he talked about intolerance. And he raised two critical issues. One is the internalization of values. The problem is because ordinary people, citizens, have not internalized the values that we all share, both Christianity and Islam share. And another problem you raised is the separation of state and religion, that government officials are not really observing the separation of religion and the state. So I want to ask you, how could we, or how could Nigerians, both the government officials and the citizens, practice and observe the separation of state and religion, or become more tolerant?
Yeah, thank you very much, Badru. Nigeria is an interesting country. If you read the Nigerian Constitution, you will find that it clearly seeks to establish the state away from religion. That individuals, Nigerian citizens, can practice religion without the state insisting that this is the way you have to go. To the extent that the Nigerian state participates in funding and supporting religious activities of the major religions. The Nigerian state will spend money sending people to Israel, sending people to Mecca and Saudi Arabia and all of that. But the problem is that, which I link to lack of internalization of religious values, and which I've argued severally, that it looks to me, quite convincingly, that the practitioners of both religions are at a very high level of pretense of whether they are Christians or whether they are Muslims. Yeah. In public places, you find Christians and Muslims speak very loudly about what they believe in. But you don't see that translated into the activity and the actions that show them as true human beings and citizens of Nigeria in relation with one another. And there are quite a number of examples in which you see the abdication of the state from activating rules that punish acts that tend to hurt other Nigerians. And like I said in the opening of my presentation, the blasphemy issues that occurred. As we speak, you can't find anywhere in Nigerian legal system where such perpetrators are arrested or they've been tried or there's anything that they can punish them. In 2014, I was again here, and I delivered a paper about the ongoing conflict between herders and farmers in Nigeria. Many of the herders are actually Muslims, and many of the farmers are Christians. And you find that relationship between the two groups deteriorating to a level that where we are today, the herders come in heavily armed and attack hordes of villages moving people out and occupying those places, and you find the Nigerian state just quiet. And so I think until we get to a point where political leaders take responsibility to ensure that rules that are supposed to be neutral in protecting the livelihoods of individuals and the lifestyles of individuals in Nigeria are activated so that they stay away from that mix of I am a political leader because I am a Muslim. Until we get to that point, religious intolerance will continue to be ongoing. And it doesn't look like it could find an easy way out until we find a political solution to activating rules that guide citizens' behavior.
Okay, this may come off as more pointed than I mean it, so please take it in a friendly manner. That's how it's intended. But it seems like there's been this theme, even from earlier and then throughout these. You mentioned, a little Christianity is a bad thing. And yet the assumption seems to be, if we could just get back to true Islam or true Christianity or true Judaism, then all of this stuff would kind of fall into place. And what's really happening is we're perverting the faith tradition. And this might be a good way to talk about theology, but it strikes me as a pretty bad way to talk about history. I mean, if we talk about these faiths as historical traditions, and we're not trying to put our norms in the mouths of our forebears, then it's really hard for me to see how we can say that the essence of any of these religions is peace or justice or any of these things that make us feel good and would help us reconcile, but that there's people dealing with the traditions in very serious ways that we would find highly problematic. And that I'm finding this talk of essence to be a little facile. I mean, if we look at like the just war tradition in Islam or Christianity or whatever, there are a lot of elements that we could find, helpful. And there are also a lot of elements that we would find highly problematic. And I don't think it's because they weren't Muslim enough. It's because they're using the sources in such a way that we don't like. So I guess my question, and again, I don't mean it to be as pointed as I think it might be coming off, is, I mean, how do we know, I mean, where are we getting this essence from? And why are we appealing to this kind of essentialism instead of saying, well, there are interpretations and these are better than those, but it's not that they get the essence right, it's because they're better for some other kind of reason. So I don't know if that question came out quite right, but my central worry is that we're assigning an essence to these religions that isn't really there.
This will not be a perfect and whole, complete response, but it will be an attempt. Perhaps as a first step, there is so much diversity even within one faith tradition. Like, for example, within Christianity, there is so much diversity within Christianity that some Christians might not regard another Christian as really Christian. And on top of that, when you throw on top of that racial differences, cultural differences, geographical differences, then that also further paints or better yet, no, taint's not the right word. You used the term earlier that it significantly alters and takes, draws away from what is really the intention, at least according to the original founders of these faith movements, and some of the early contributors. And not that any one particular person or group of people or movements throughout history ever perfected it. The second key point I want to acknowledge here is want to be careful of putting out the assumption that religion itself is a bad thing, because there is a slow but growing movement among a younger generation that religion itself is a means of division. And so therefore, quote unquote, it should be abolished. I mentioned something about secular humanists before, where it entails the belief that God is not necessary in order for human creatures to do good, or to do good for one another. One of the drawbacks from that is this: even if we take out the idea that good works are tainted or stained by our sinful nature, one of the key values that a faith tradition has, before we get to any specifics, is this. The scientific world can unlock all kinds of mysteries of life. It can show us and expose to us things that have been considered mystery from the human creature for ages. It can describe how life works, how life functions, and all different aspects and components of life. But one thing that science cannot do is it cannot answer the question, what's the purpose of life? Or better yet, it cannot answer the question, why are we here? Why do we exist? Now, religion itself does have an answer for that. We may not all agree on that answer for that one, but religion itself has an answer to the question that is probably embedded in the core beliefs of many human creatures, is why do we exist? What's our purpose? Why are we here? So now to add on to that, so human creatures do have to make sense of the world and their purpose and my purpose as well, based on what we have and what's been made available to us. And religion, more so than any other social institution, is better suited for that. But also, we also have to take a humble approach, even toward our own faith tradition, knowing that our understanding and our interpretation of these traditions are still subject to our own personal human error.
Even among those who do not believe in the existence of God, those who do not have faith in the sense in which the Abrahamic faith do, accepts the cordiality of human existence. So these faiths we talk about have an essence. And we are not just trying in the 21st century to impute a new essence into them. Each of these three religions and faith we talk about drives existence towards a peaceful normality. That's what you find in the Holy Scriptures. That's what you find in the holy books. That's what you find in the teachings of all the prophets among the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims. I think what has happened over time is that individuals have taken a bit of each of these religions wherever they have perpetrated violence and created disharmony and so on. They have taken a bit of it and expanded it in order to push their ego forward and take advantage of vulnerability of society and abandoned the core essence of each of these faiths. I think that's what we are trying to do, to see whether we can reclaim the very essence of these religions, which is premised around peace. And if we do not reclaim that basis, then we can continue and on and on. But the basis of this dialogue is to be able to help us and see whether we will be able to pull back society from its brink, so that the fundamental core of these faiths will project the very essence of that cordial humanity we all belong to.
Thank you very much for the enriching discussion and the questions. We don't have time for more questions. Just I think we are left with questioning our truth, whether we can question the truth, and whether meaning is coming from different sources or just one source. Thank you very much.